And all right, welcome everybody. Great to have everyone here with us. I'm thrilled to be with Megla Bardwaj and Martin Raleigh. How are you today?
Great, thanks.
Hi, Gary. We're doing well. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So today we have a special masterclass on sourcing products from Vietnam for your private label brand. So I know a lot of you guys have had number of headaches with the China lockdown. So a lot of people are looking for alternatives to China. We're not saying that Vietnam necessarily can replace all of China, but I think there's a lot of product opportunities and sourcing opportunities. That's why I want to invite Megla and Mark with us here today. And then we're going to walk through a lot of the details on sourcing from Vietnam, how to source in Vietnam. Can this be done virtually, or do you have to physically be there? Some cost breakdowns between Vietnam and China, and a number of ways to source from Vietnam and China. So I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers today. So Megla Bardwaj has over 20 years experience in sourcing from Asia. She's visited hundreds of factories and dozens of trade shows around the region. She really has a deep and wide understanding of the whole manufacturing sourcing processes. And together with Mark and Kevin, she organizes sourcing trips to India and now Vietnam. This is brand new. And she's also co-founder of the India Sourcing Network. And Mark, I wanted to introduce you as a very successful and experienced Amazon seller based in Australia. She has firsthand experience. She really knows all of the daily challenges faced by all of you guys. And she's traveled extensively from Vietnam, India, China, visiting factories and trade shows. And she has a wealth of information to draw upon. So I know we have a lot to cover today. So without further ado, I'd like to dive right in and hand it over to Megla and Mark.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gary. And I'm going to share my screen. So we have some slides to share, and we'll also take everyone's questions. So we will probably go for about 30-35 minutes with our slides, and then we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. All right.
Perfect. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then Megla and Mark will take a look and answer them when they're ready. All right, let's get started.
Yeah. All right, let's go. All right, so here are the topics that we're going to be covering today. Vietnam exports overview, why you should consider sourcing from Vietnam, Vietnam versus China, product categories, how to find suppliers, and then we'll also talk a little bit about our upcoming Vietnam sourcing trip. Okay, so first of all, an overview of Vietnam's exports. Now take a look at this chart. Overall, from 2011, Vietnam's exports have been growing consistently. And in 2021, they were $375 billion. So this is, just to show you guys that overall, Vietnam has been doing really well in terms of manufacturing and exports. Now, here are some of the key markets that Vietnam exports to. And not surprisingly, United States is the biggest market with 29% market share. Then China, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, all of the other countries. So it's a very varied and diverse, market that Vietnam exports to, but then US is the main market. All right, top product categories that Vietnam does. Now here you see electrical machinery, and this also includes electronics, like mobile phones and things like that. And in fact, there are a lot of very large companies, MNCs, that have set up factories in Vietnam to export products and also supply to the domestic market. Then footwear, that's a huge product category as well. It's quite surprising to some people, but there are, of course, the bigger companies that have set up footwear factories there, but now there are also smaller factories that are coming up, and you can practically find all types of footwear in Vietnam, whether it's sports shoes, boots, slippers, flip-flops, anything. Then clothing and accessories is another big clothing accessories not knitted. Nuclear reactors and boilers. Okay, I don't think we're going to be sourcing that. At least I hope not. Furniture and bedding. Now, this is a very interesting category, furniture, and Vietnam has really exploded in terms of manufacturing furniture. I've got a couple of slides to show that Vietnam is actually exceeding China in terms of furniture exports, which is amazing. I mean, if you consider it. And then there's other food items like fish, edible oil, plastics as well. Plastics is quite interesting because we also talk about India as a sourcing option and an alternative to China, but India doesn't currently do plastics really well in terms of, you know, the variety of products available or cost competitiveness. But Vietnam does compete with China in terms of plastic, and it can be a great alternative to China. Okay, so why you should consider sourcing from Vietnam? The number one reason is low labor costs. If you see this chart over here, overall production costs and labor costs in China have been increasing over the years. And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of the bigger companies that have products that are manually labor intensive, they've been moving out of China to low labor cost areas such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, India, Sri Lanka. And these are categories like apparel, also some handmade products, like not handmade, but products that require a lot of cut and sew and handwork, like bags, backpacks, those kinds of things. Whereas Vietnam, you see the wages over here are so much lower as compared to China. So if you do have a product that requires labor, that's labor intensive, Vietnam will be overall more cost effective. Okay, another advantage is that there's a very large, well-educated labor force. Now, even though the population is only 98 million compared to China's 1+ billion, but 95% of the labor force is literate. 57% of overall labor force population is in the labor force, and the labor force is 7 years younger than it is in China. The government has also been emphasizing a lot on training and skill development overall. They've been emphasizing the manufacturing sector significantly. So you will find a lot of, trained laborers and workforce over there, and productive as well. That's super important to mention. They're, very productive as compared to China too. Free trade agreements. Now, this is one of the main reasons why Vietnam's exports have exploded. We, of course, all know that there are some trade tensions between the US and China, but Vietnam has been very friendly to all of the main, import markets. So overall, Vietnam is a signatory to 18 active and planned free trade agreements. There's the EU free trade agreement, UK, Trans-Pacific Partnership, US, and also one with India, plus a lot more. So all of these agreements allow products from Vietnam to be exported to these regions duty-free and or with limited duties, and that, of course, benefits both sides significantly. Okay,
Mangala, can I just highlight that point, because that is super important for private label sellers. Vietnam has a free trade agreement with a number of countries, and that means, with the China-US trade war that's still ongoing, indeterminate how long it's going on, you can circumvent that, 25% plus the duty rate, right? So if you do the math, that could be a significant saving for you guys. I mean, but it depends on where you're exporting to. Vietnam has FTAs with a number of different countries, so definitely when you're knowing your bottom line, pay attention to that. All right, so that's a great tip. Thanks, Michael.
Exactly, and look at the overall landed cost. Sometimes the price in China, the product cost and the price might be lower in China compared to Vietnam because the supply chains are more developed. But if you look at the overall landed cost, because of duties, it may be cheaper to source from Vietnam. So the government is really incentivizing manufacturing. There's fewer restrictions on FDIs, foreign direct investment. So there are a lot of big MNCs, big companies that are setting up their factories. And what happens is, in any new production hub, first the big companies set up factories, and then the supply chain develops. And once the supply chain develops, there are raw material suppliers and service providers. Then what happens is that smaller companies, mid-sized companies, OEM manufacturers also start developing. And so that's also started to happen now in Vietnam. Maybe 5-8 years ago, if you went to Vietnam, you wouldn't find too many factories over there. But now there are China invested factories, there are local Vietnamese factories that do OEM production as well. Overall, the government has issued several tax incentives and tax holidays for different manufacturing process projects. There's incentives in high-tech zones, industrial zones, and socioeconomic areas. And specifically, they've identified a couple of high tech sectors like textiles, garments, IT, automobiles, assembly, etc., to prioritize. Okay, Vietnam versus China. So as we first mentioned, Vietnam has typically lower labor costs, China production costs, FTAs with many countries, and also some geopolitical tensions with the US and Europe, but Vietnam has good relations with the West. No US trade tariffs, high trade tariffs by the US. Market share of certain categories is increasing, such as furniture and shoes, and I'll show you a couple of charts on that. And in fact, China, market share of certain categories is reducing. Let's take a look at this. So there are a couple of charts to show those product categories in the next few slides. But there are some cons as well. So in Vietnam, there's a limited product range, whereas China, of course, has a vast product range. I don't think Vietnam or any other country is going to replace China as a manufacturing and sourcing hub in the near future. But gradually what's going to happen is there are going to be multiple production hubs that emerge that will sort of replace China or replace pieces or various product categories that China is making. And overall, China's market share will decrease. Also, China is trying to move up the value chain and produce more high-end, high-value products. So a lot of the low-value production is going to move out to different countries. Infrastructure in Vietnam is pretty good, but definitely China has much better infrastructure in terms of roads, ports, etc. Most materials and components need to be currently imported from Vietnam. So this is a big limitation that Vietnam has. You know, a lot of the plastic raw materials, for example, or fabrics, materials, leather for shoes, footwear, is imported from China. China is just neighboring to Vietnam, but that does add some time to the overall production time. But there are companies that import materials in bulk, and the materials are also available locally. And of course, in China, all materials and components are available locally. So that's a big advantage. Okay, so these are some very interesting charts. Now, China, this is overall clothing and accessories, furniture, footwear. These are all the different product categories. And these charts show China's overall export market share from 2016 to 2022. Now, if you see clothing and accessories from 41% in 2016, it's down to 37%. Furniture, 64% to 53%. Footwear, 72% to 65%. Travel goods and bags, 83% to 70%. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that overall exports are decreasing. This just means that that China's market share is reducing. And who is taking up this market share? It's mostly Vietnam and also some other countries. But this is interesting. Furniture in Vietnam, in 2016, Vietnam's export percentage was 8% of furniture. And in 2022, it's 17%. So that's a huge jump. It's almost doubled. Footwear, 12% to 16%. Travel goods, 6% to 10%. So this really shows us that, you know, a lot of buyers and brands are seeing Vietnam as a very viable alternative to China. Now, furniture is really interesting because, I mean, even though Vietnam is such a small country, it has really become a huge furniture production hub. And it is the export market share is almost the same as China's export market share. In fact, in 2020, Vietnam's market share was more than China's market share, 33% versus 32%. In 2021, both countries were around 31%, and 2022 numbers are not available yet, but Vietnam is expected to take the lead again in 2022. So that's very interesting. I mean, in case you guys are doing furniture, knockdown furniture, of course, not beddings and, you know, so beds and sofa items, those probably would be too bulky for e-commerce, but any other small furniture item, Vietnam is an awesome alternative to China. All right, so Mark, this is over to you for product categories.
No worries. Thanks, Megla. Yeah, well, look, there are various product categories. We'll just quickly go through these. You've got clothing and textiles. Now, $45 billion was exported in 2022 and 40 in 2021. So as you can see, it's growing very quickly with clothing and textiles, and it's 5.2% of the global market share. It's the third largest textile exporter in the world now. You've got US, South Korea, Japan, and Europe are the biggest importers. suppliers focusing on eco-friendly practices such as reducing and recycling and waste. Now that's something I think that's very big around the world now. People are looking for more eco-friendly sort of alternatives when they're sourcing their products to, you know, promote to their buyers. So I think that's something that is really good. And most of the fabric is imported from China and Taiwan. And the types of clothing you can get is sportswear, t-shirts, socks, casual wear, uniforms, outerwear, formal wear, underwear, ready-made garments, yarns, technical fabrics, and labels. And I quite often find now when I look inside a t-shirt or something I've purchased, it's got made in Vietnam in it. So it is really becoming a lot more prevalent in things that I tend to buy. Next slide, please, Megan. Footwear. Now, footwear is, I think, a real surprise to me because Vietnam is so small, but they do so much in actual footwear, and they do a good job. I've actually got some shoes I had made when I was over there a few years ago, and they're still going strong. They're really, really well made. So there was $23.8 billion in exports in 2022, 17.8 in 2021. Now, 90% of their shoes that are produced are exported, and it's 16% of the global market share. There's actually 2,200 factories, mostly around Ho Chi Minh City, and like factories like Nike and Adidas have their main production bases there. And you can also get like, you know, thongs, flip-flops, sandals, good quality leather shoes, sneakers, and boots. Next slide, please. Now, wooden furniture and wooden products. There is a lot of furniture made in Vietnam that's probably too big for most of the people who are watching today, but it also does a lot of smaller type wooden sort of home decor products and things like that. So $16.5 billion of exports in 2022 compared to 14.5 in 2021, and 4.4% of products exported from the country are actually furniture. And it actually has 17% of the global export market share now, but 70 to 80% of the materials that it's made from are actually imported. And it's #1 and #2 exporter in the world, just depending on, it's going backwards and forwards with China at the moment. And the main export markets are US, UK, China, Japan, and South Korea. And the furniture you can get is obviously home furnishings, office supplies, hospitality and outdoor. And I think you'll find there's quite often big factories in Australia or outlets that just sell products that are imported from Vietnam, and they're really usually great and very different. So I think if you're looking for something a little bit out of the box, Vietnam is the place to look for furnishings. Next one, please, Nicola. Electronics and electrical equipment. $131 billion in exports in 2021. That's a huge amount. Samsung, Intel, Foxconn, LG all have significant factories over in Vietnam, and they do phones, PCs, laptops, cameras, TVs, and some domestic brands are also coming up, but most production is by MNCSs. So I think it's probably something that us small people won't want to be involved in. I don't think anyone would want to talk to us about doing anything like a phone or something. We need to be a big multinational, but it does, you know, you have a lot of sort of factories over there that do that. Next slide, please. Plastics and rubber goods. Now, 5.5 billion annual exports of rubber and plastic goods, mostly basic consumer goods such as rubber dog toys, home products, and sunglasses. And the most common method is plastic injection, but you can actually find other methods, including plastic extrusion and welding. Rubber manufacturers offer extrusion, latex dipping, molding, and coloring. And Vietnam isn't a great option if you're sourcing a product or components made of rubber or plastic, and particularly if you're sourcing something out of China at the moment, like anything that's plastic bowls or something like you can see in the side here, you'll find that that's all readily available in Vietnam and will be probably a lot more economical because you're not going to have the actual duties to take it in, especially into the US. And it's amazing. They do, I can't wait to get over to Vietnam and get some sunglasses and glasses frames made. They do really good and so cheap, things like that. So if they're the sort of things you're even looking at doing, that's another option to China for those types of things as well. Next slide, please. Packaging, that's a big surprise. They actually do 1.7 billion of annual exports of packaging, and it's cardboard boxes, soda cans, plastic packaging, etc. And it's used for food and beverages, cosmetics, pharmaceutical, bottling and beverages, barcoding, printing and labeling. Next slide, please. Now, bamboo and rattan, I think that's probably what most people see Vietnam as being famous for, and it's quite prevalent there. When you look that in the US, there was $474 million in exports in 2019. And the rattan is baskets, furniture, a lot of storage containers, handicrafts, toys, wall hangings, chairs, ottomans. So I think that's probably one of the bigger markets for e-commerce. The other products you can actually get there that maybe aren't so much for us again is iron and steel, construction, coffee and seafood. Next slide, please. Now, finding suppliers in Vietnam, this can be a little bit tricky. It's not as easy as in some countries. Now, Alibaba Vietnam, you can use, once again, you need to use the country filter when you're trying to source that. So you might find it's a little bit harder to find them. Global sources have quite a good site. There's Vietnam Export, Vietnam Manufacturers and Vietnam Made. You might find the last three are a little bit, I've tried to negotiate them and they're a little bit harder to negotiate through to find suppliers on. It's not quite as simple as some sites. Do you want to go on to the next slide, please? Now, trade associations, if you're looking for something in particular, there are many, many trade associations in Vietnam, like Vietnam Textile and Apparel Association, the Rubber Association, footwear, leather and handbags, and electronics industry. So that's a good place to start if you're wanting to look in a particular niche, if you know what you're looking for. Next slide, please. Trade shows. Now, there are trade shows galore in Vietnam. I can't believe, I think there's a trade show on almost every week for some different industry. So Global Sources Fair in Vietnam is on actually next month. That's for gifts, home, fashion, focused mainly on international exports. And we're actually going to that, and Megla will speak about that as we get through the slides. There's also the Vietnam International Furniture and Home Accessories Expo. That's a huge furniture expo. There's International Textile and Apparel and Accessories exhibitions. There's processing and packaging exhibitions. And I think there's one for anything you can think of that they make. There is an exhibition if you go through the calendar for those. Next slide, please, Megan. Sourcing agencies. It's probably one good way to actually start if you're sort of starting out in Vietnam. There's many local and foreign sourcing agencies in Vietnam. Now, some of them charge a flat fee and some charge a percentage of the order value. So you need to sort of shop around and see which way you want to go with that. Our recommended sourcing agency is Cosmo Sourcing. They actually have a flat fee on most of their services, and the email is there if you wanted to contact Jim. Next one, please.
Mark, can I quickly just add a comment?
Yes,
we've had Jim Kennemer. He's the founder of Cosmo Sourcing. He's American, but been based in Asia and Vietnam for many years. Jim is very well knowledgeable. He's very knowledgeable about the about sourcing from Vietnam. In fact, he's an alumni speaker of our 7-figure seller sourcing summit. So I can vouch for him that he knows his stuff. So just a quick note, Jim Kennemer. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Back to you, Megla.
All right, thank you for that, Mark. So let's just quickly talk about our upcoming Vietnam sourcing trip, and then we'll take questions from everybody. So a Vietnam sourcing trip is a 10-day immersive tour to Vietnam, which is, of course, an emerging alternate sourcing destination. So the main focus of this trip is to basically introduce you to sourcing from Vietnam, to take you to factories so that you can see how products are made and you can see a lot of different product categories, and also to help you understand how sourcing in Vietnam works, because it is very different from China. So we are going to be visiting factories. We'll have a conference where you can learn about sourcing from Vietnam. We're going to introduce you to a lot of service providers. Jim will be there as well. We are also going to be introducing you to freight forwarders, quality control companies, maybe even a lawyer, other sourcing experts as well. And all of these connections will help you source products from Vietnam when you are ready, because of course you do need these service providers. And of course, we're also going to be experiencing some culture. We'll be spending one night on a boat. We'll be traveling to 3 different cities. So we start in Hanoi, then we travel to Da Nang, and then we go to Ho Chi Minh City. We'll also be attending Global Sources Trade Show. This trade show is actually not a very big trade show. It's got about 300 to 500 suppliers or exhibitors, and we'll be spending one day at this trade show. So the focus is not really on the trade show, it's more on visiting factories and learning all about sourcing from Vietnam. So here are some benefits. You'll visit pre-qualified factories, learning the A to Z of sourcing in Vietnam, be introduced to our vetted and trusted service providers, see thousands of home, gift, and fashion products at an export-focused trade show. Now, this is important to mention. There are a lot of trade shows that are held in Vietnam, as Mark mentioned, but a lot of them are really focused on the domestic market. And you'll have, maybe MNCs or foreign companies exhibiting at those trade shows to target or sell their products in the domestic market. The Global Sources Fair is 100% export-focused. And so all exhibitors there are either exporters from Vietnam, and they also have exporters from other countries. And then in the evenings, we have mastermind sessions with sourcing and e-commerce experts. We've got quite a few experts who are joining us. First of all, we have Ben Leonard. I think we've got the experts on subsequent slides. And then you can also engage with other e-commerce sellers and brands who are already buying products from Vietnam. Understand the pitfalls to avoid cultural differences. Enjoy Vietnam's scenic beauty as we visit the famous Ha Long Bay and other tourist spots. And of course, savor the delicious food. On our sourcing trips, whether it's India or Vietnam, we focus a lot on cultural aspects because we believe that, you're doing business with a country, but you do need to understand how, what kind of cultural differences there are from your own culture in order to be able to, deal better with the suppliers. So this is our itinerary. We arrive in Hanoi on April 19th. We do a full day conference, factory visits, networking, drinks and dinner, information sessions, and then we spend a night on the boat at Ha Long Bay. So we're in Hanoi for about 3 days. Then we fly to Da Nang on April 22nd. We do more factory visits there. We have information sessions. We visit this Hoi An local market where there are a lot of different shops that make a lot of the handmade kind of products that you can find in Vietnam. Networking, drinks, and dinner. And then we also have a cultural show in Da Nang. We're in Da Nang for about 2 days. Then we travel to Ho Chi Minh City, where we do more factory visits. We do a street walk in the Bintan markets. We visit the trade show, more information sessions, and then we end the trip with the Saigon River dinner cruise, which is pretty awesome. So this is the overall itinerary. Dates are April 19th to the 28th. Here are some of the experts joining us. Jim Kennemer, of course, from Cosmo Sourcing. Ben Leonard, who is also sourcing his new brand from Vietnam. He's in fact exited 2 of his brands, and he's currently the founder of Ecom Brokers, but for his new brands, he has been sourcing from Vietnam. We've got RSJ Inspection. They are our recommended inspection company in India, and so they also offer services in Vietnam. So they're a trusted inspection company that we know. They're going to be there. Got Samiksha Sachdeva, who's a logistics expert, and they're also our recommended freight forwarder in India and Vietnam. We got CJ Rosenbaum, Kathy Lloyd. She's also going to be joining us. And I don't think, we have one more, Lynn Sundin. She is a 7-figure seller who's been sourcing her products from Vietnam. All of her products, or 95% of her products are from Vietnam. So she's joining us as well. And then Jeff Schick, who's also a lawyer, he will be joining us as well. So overall, you can get more information at vietnamsourcingtrip.com, or if you have any questions, you can reach out to me or Margaret on Messenger, or you can email us at info@vietnamsourcingtrip.com. But this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really go there and see how products are manufactured, firsthand, touch and feel the products. I think if you're really serious about sourcing from any country, whether it's China, India, Vietnam, the best way to do that is to really go there and meet suppliers face to face and touch and feel products. So that is it for from us, Gary, and I'm going to stop
Excellent.
sharing the screen.
Thank you so much for the super valuable training, and we will drop the link in the chat in just a moment if you do want to check out the trip I think it's a great opportunity, and I feel like I mean, I personally, I visited Vietnam many years ago with my wife. We actually did a trip very similar to the itinerary what Mark and Megla shared. I mean, it's not only like the sourcing, but you get a taste of the food. You'll see Ha Long Bay, which is like the most picturesque, like those traditional carved, like stone mountains. You're sailing on a little like boats, and you're just absorbing that culture. Da Nang is a beautiful beach. Hoi An is a quaint little city, and you get to see like the handicraft, and you get to see the trade show, and you get the training. I mean, if I had the time, I would definitely love to go on this trip. And talking to the other sellers, like Ben and the people already sourcing, so highly recommend you guys check that out. But yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, and let's quickly take some questions, and we will drop the link in the chat in just a second. All right, Megla, I saw there was a question from Tudier. Do you want to take that question? I believe Tudier had questions about some of examples of product listings in.
Yeah, so we I mean, we don't have examples right now, Sudhir, but you can get in touch with us, and we can show you some examples. But we're also doing a live webinar just right after this, in fact, in case anyone's interested. We're doing a live webinar with Lynn Sundin, who's a 7-figure seller who is sourcing from Vietnam. So in case you want to join that webinar, she might not disclose her exact products because people are a bit protective of their product categories on Amazon, but she will definitely be talking about her own experience. And is it okay, Gary, if I drop the YouTube link of our upcoming webinar over here?
Yes, absolutely. If you want to get some more training after this, absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to go more in depth, because this was just like an overview of why Vietnam, why you should consider Vietnam. So this is going to be on YouTube, and you can join the link here.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I think there was a delay on my screen. So you guys already have the link for the chat. I mean, the link in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. So okay, so now guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat right now for Megla and Mark. We have just a few minutes before they have to run. I had a couple of questions. Talking about factories, Vietnam factories, what's the typical MOQ? Because I heard that they were very high, the full container load at least. I mean, compared to China, it could be like 500 units more or less. What are you guys seeing? I'm curious.
Yes, you're right, Gary. And some factories do require high MOQs because they have very large setups. It doesn't make sense for them to do smaller orders, but we're increasingly seeing more factories accommodating smaller orders. And in fact, some factories won't even talk to you because they have so much business. If you send them an email and say that, hey, I want to source 500 pieces or something, they probably just not even reply to your email because they have a lot of business. But there are factories that cater to smaller businesses because a lot of factories nowadays are Vietnam owned factories that are starting up. The bigger factories are mostly China invested, and they have huge setups. So those are the types of factories that would typically have larger MOQs. But the local factories, and then there's also all of these handmade products, like for example, baskets and the bamboo cane, rattan, those kinds of products are also made by small and mid-sized enterprises in Vietnam. So the MOQs are typically lower. So for our trip, we are trying to find these factories that will accept low MOQs. They are out there, but they're just harder to find.
And ceramics is another big sort of one that is actually, some of the factories obviously are huge that do, the bigger brand name, but there are a lot of smaller factories up near Hoi An that actually do smaller handicraft, like done in the villages, and they're sold in a particular village there. So yeah, those sort of things, and I think they're probably things that e-com sellers are looking for. I mean, most people aren't going to be doing shoes in the container or anything like that. So I think the products that a lot of us are looking for are going to be able to be sourced in the smaller volumes more so. I think the bigger volumes are the clothing, the t-shirts, the things that a lot of us wouldn't actually probably be doing in our e-com business as well. So it makes it a lot easier, to look in those sort of
Okay.
handicraft type areas.
Okay. And what about the speed of delivery, Vietnam versus China? Because I did see that some of the raw materials, fabrics, they're imported from overseas, from China, Taiwan, etc. I mean, what are we typically expecting to source a product from Vietnam to, let's say, ship it to the US?
Yeah, so it really depends on the product and the order volume and how busy the supplier is. So there's lots to go, lots to help you decide. But then overall, we haven't seen, especially if products are machine made or if they're things like apparel, backpacks, lead times are typically slightly only longer than China. And it also depends on if the supplier has a raw material readily available. If you're placing a really large order and they have to customize the raw material for you, for example, then it probably needs to be imported from China, which would extend the lead time. But if you're doing small orders and the raw materials are available, then it's anywhere from 30 to 45 days.
30 to 45 days. Is that for the lead time, or did that,
That's typically
The-
manufacturing time, and then you would
manufacturing,
add, yeah.
okay. And what about the shipping time? If, let's say, we're shipping by sea, how did that compare? Like, let's say from Shanghai to Port of Long Beach, LA versus like Da Nang to Port of Long Beach, how did that compare?
So shipping times, Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, look, there won't be a great deal of difference between the two. I mean, it might be it's just really a few days. You haven't got a huge shipping time. It's going to be, and obviously you'll be going into California. It'll be quicker than going into, whereas with India, we go into New York. So this will be, for anyone who's, knows that one, it'll be, you're going to California. So yeah, it's not going to make, a big time difference with China.
Okay.
Because it depends where you're going, of course, in China too, which port, because there's so many ports in China where you're actually heading from. So it can vary.
Right. Okay. Excellent. And how about in terms of sourcing from Vietnam? Someone asked, can it be done virtually, or do you have to physically be there?
No, it can be done virtually. But it always helps to visit a factory, regardless of where you're sourcing from. I mean, if, bigger buyers, they would definitely visit the factory before sourcing from a new factory, or get somebody to visit on their behalf so that, they know that it's a decent factory and it meets their requirements. So it always helps. It also helps to build relationships. I mean, in Asia, China, Vietnam, India, even more, relationships are so important. And if you go there, they know that you are really serious, and they give you more respect. They give you priority treatment, better terms, better payment terms. So it really helps. But of course, you can source virtually as well. I think the trickiest part is really finding the supplier or a supplier that's right for you. Because even though there are so many, online directories and all of these things, it's sometimes very tricky to really know what the company really specializes in and what their core expertise is. So it helps to have somebody, visit the factory, or somebody who understands the industry to help you find these products or these suppliers. It does help to get someone to assist you.
And I think too, by going to the factory, because a lot of the factories over there have actually been set up by the Chinese and sort of moved into Vietnam with just maybe one or two people at the front of the bigger factories. So in actual fact, you're dealing with Chinese management behind. But I mean, if you go to the factory, you're going to quickly find out, once you get into that factory, a lot more about it than just being online and getting that salesman's face, I suppose, at the front. So I think, going to the factory is, the way to go to actually find out, where you're actually dealing and who you're dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned earlier, Meghala, get someone to visit on your behalf to the factory. How would you recommend someone do that?
So there are a couple of different ways. One is you can work through, via a sourcing agent like Jim, and we have a couple of other sourcing agencies that will be on the trip as well. Or you can get somebody to do a factory audit, and RSJ inspection can do that on your behalf. They have, QAs and inspectors on the ground, and for a couple of $100s, they can go visit the factory and do an audit to and give you a very detailed report on what they saw in terms of the equipment, machinery, how big the supplier is, whatever information you need, they can do that for you in a factory audit.
Okay. And talking about relationships, as we know, China's famous for, building the relationships, guanxi, and even, drinking or karaoke, etc. How is relationship building like in Vietnam?
I think it's very similar in Vietnam. Overall, Asia, I feel, relationship building is important regardless of which country you go to. India, it's even more important. And the other thing you'll find is that, maybe in Vietnam, the top bosses might not speak English very fluently. So you might have, a translator accompany you at dinner if you sort of go out. But again, if you're coming from overseas, if you have a factory that you're already sourcing from, you can bring them a gift, for example. That always helps to build relationships. And I just feel it's really important. And again, going there really reinforces that you are serious, and that really helps with relationship building in the long term.
Excellent. All right. Are there any other questions you guys have you'd like to drop in the chat?
There's one there, Gary. How are they with wooden toy products? That's one of the questions.
Mark, do you want to take that?
Yeah, look, I mean, they make a lot of wooden products. So, I mean, toys are not going to be hard. I mean, they're, one of the biggest exporters of wood. And another thing that they actually make is they have bamboo, because China's obviously very famous for its bamboo for a lot of, furniture and home gifts and things. Whereas in India, there's no bamboo. So that is another alternative. If you want to break away from China, Vietnam actually does bamboo, has that available as well. So that's another alternative for, if you wanted like wooden toys.
Excellent. What about Sinead had a question. What's the price of the Vietnam sourcing trip? Can you give us a breakdown and what does it include? Does it include like the hotels as well? Mm-hmm.
Yes, so this is an all-inclusive trip that includes everything from the time you step out of the Hanoi airport. So it does not include airfare, but includes everything else. Hotels, internal flights as well, the different cities, all the cultural activities, food, transportation, factory visits, access to coaches, pre-trip webinars and post-trip webinars as well to help you with the sourcing, all connections to our service providers. And Gary, you've been on our India trip, right? We really take care of people and make sure that they're comfortable.
Megla, she's offers like the white glove 5-star treatment, so take good care of you, from the training side to the cultural side to like even the food side. So I mean, everybody walked away very happy. I expect the same, going to Vietnam.
Yeah, and it actually even includes your alcohol with dinner every night, so that you don't really need to spend, unless you want some spending money for at the markets or something to buy some gifts. You basically, don't need any, and there's water provided all day on the trips and the buses. So, you're not really putting your hand in your pocket for virtually anything unless it's personal expenses.
Yeah. So there are two options in terms of the trip. There's one option is you can share a hotel room with another attendee, or if you bring a business partner, and the cost for that is $5,000 US. And then there's another option where you can actually get a single room in the hotel, or you're the only person in the hotel room, and that is for $5,400. You can pay in installments, so there's 3 monthly installments that you can pay in. And also we have a discount code. So if you use Gary's discount code, which is 7FSS, you get a $300 off on the overall trip. And in case someone does not want to do the cultural aspects, we can customize the trip so that you only join us for the factory visits and trade show and information sessions in Ho Chi Minh City. And if you want to skip all of the cultural activities and just focus on the sourcing and learning, we have that option as well. You can reach out to us at info@vietnamsourcingtrip.com for more information about that.
And we can actually do a shorter trip. If somebody just says like 10 days, it's too long, I can't do that. Maybe they could just fly in and do, the last 4 days in Ho Chi Minh City, where we do the fair and factory tours, and don't do the How Long Bay and the Hoi An market and things like that. So if people are feeling that we can't afford to be away for 10 days or something, come to us and talk to us, and you might be able to fly in when we fly in on the last leg or something like that, if that's what you're interested in. And the factories are pretty well, there's a lot in Ho Chi Minh City. There's so many factories down there to visit in just about every sort of niche, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. I know that Megla and Mark have a hard stop right now. What is the best way for people to follow up with you for any questions if they have them?
Sorry, Gary, there's just one question from Casey.
Yep.
Maybe
Okay.
you can quickly address that. Would you help and look into a specific product that is not on your current list? Yes, Casey, we can do that. You can reach out to us at info@vietnamsourcingtrip.com, and we'll be able to look into that for you.
Okay.
Sorry,
Could
Gary,
someone
so-
drop that in the chat just so we have it, and we'll share that on the replay in our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I'm just writing it there.
All right. So thank you everybody for coming on. I think this is a great opportunity. I mean, the best way to source is to get on the ground, hands-on, to meet your supplier, to touch and feel the product. I think this is a great opportunity for a lot of people. It is an investment, but I feel like you will be investing in your business and also meeting suppliers as well, and all of these other partners. So thank you for that. And just to be transparent, I am an affiliate of the Vietnam sourcing trip. So if you do purchase using our coupon code, we will get a small commission for that. So that enables us to continue putting on free content and free training for you guys. So I appreciate that. All right. So thank you, Megla. Thank you, Mark, for coming on, for giving this very informative training on Vietnam sourcing. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did too. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. And we will see you guys at the next session. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Gary. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Gary.